Captain Jake Russo was, by all accounts, the punchline of Station Helix 7. Not because he was bad at his job. Jake had 17 confirmed solo extractions, 42 successful escort missions, and a spotless record with the Galactic Coalition Mercenary Corps. No, Jake was a joke because he insisted on carrying a katana, an actual, honest-to-God, folded steel earth katana from the 21st century. In an age where plasma rifles could punch through 6 inches of reinforced titanium and particle beams could disintegrate organic matter in microseconds, Jake Russo walked around with a sword like some kind of medieval cosplayer. His squadmates never let him forget it. "Hey Russo, you planning to challenge the next pirate lord to a duel for his honor?" Lieutenant Vorn clicked his mandibles in what passed for laughter among his species. The Talvarian stood 8 feet tall with 4 arms, each one capable of operating a separate weapon system simultaneously. His people had evolved past the concept of melee combat roughly 10,000 years ago. Jake adjusted the leather strap across his chest, settling the katana against his back with practiced ease. Maybe. Depends on if he deserves it. Pilot Rexa, a scaled reptilian with eyes that could track targets at hypersonic speeds, slithered up beside him at the station cantina. Her forked tongue flicked out in amusement. "You know what I love about humans? Your adorable commitment to extinct traditions. It's like watching a museum exhibit that talks back." "Extinct implies it stopped working," Jake said, taking a sip of his coffee. Real coffee, imported from Earth at ridiculous expense. Another human eccentricity. And when exactly did swords work against energy weapons? Vorn's logical Talvarian brain couldn't process the concept. "Please, explain the tactical advantage of bringing a primitive bladed weapon to modern warfare." Jake set down his mug and met Vorn's cluster of eyes with a perfectly straight face. "Style, points." Rexa nearly choked on her drink. The alarm klaxons shattered the moment, bathing Station Helix 7 inches rotating red light. Jake's comlink crackled to life before he could even stand up. "All Coalition personnel to Briefing Bay 3. Immediate deployment. This is not a drill." The cantina emptied in seconds. Mercs from a dozen species scrambled toward their stations, the casual atmosphere evaporating into military precision. Jake followed Vorn and Rexa through the corridors, his hand instinctively checking the katana's position. Old habits. Commander Thrace was already at the holographic display when they arrived, his insectoid form hunched over the tactical readout. The Chirex officer had a reputation for being brilliant and insufferable in equal measure. His compound eyes refracted the blue light of the display as he addressed the assembled team. "Krellian raiders have hit Research Outpost Gamma 9. 12 hostages, all civilian scientists. The raiders are equipped with military-grade energy weapons, and they're dug in deep." Thrace's translator rendered his chittering into flat, emotionless standard. "Intelligence suggests they're after the outpost's quantum computing data. We have a 4-hour window before they crack the encryption and disappear into dark space." The hologram rotated, showing the outpost's layout. Narrow corridors, multiple choke points, perfect ambush territory. "Standard loadout," Thrace continued. "Plasma rifles, pulse grenades, kinetic shields. We hit them fast," and his eyes fixed on Jake, who was methodically strapping on his gear, including the katana. "Russo, please tell me you're not bringing that ridiculous letter opener on a combat operation." The briefing room went quiet. A few mercs smirked. Rexa winced. Jake looked up, his expression deadpan. "What, this?" "Nah, Commander. This is my toothpick. The letter opener's in my other pants." Vorn's mandibles clicked nervously. "Russo, perhaps just this once." "I'm good." Thrace's wings buzzed in irritation. "Fine. Get yourself killed with your antique. Just don't slow down the team." He turned back to the display. "We drop in 10 minutes. Move out." As they headed to the deployment bay, Rexa sidled up to Jake. "You know, one of these days that mouth of yours is going to write a check your sword can't cash." Jake grinned. "Then I guess I better keep my credit good." Research Outpost Gamma 9 looked like someone had taken a can opener to it. Scorch marks decorated the walls, and the acrid smell of melted circuitry hung in the recycled air. Jake's boots crunched on debris as the team moved through the breached entrance in tactical formation. Vorn's 4 arms held separate scanning devices and weapons, his heads-up display painting threat assessments across his vision. "I'm reading 17 hostiles, concentrated in the central lab. They've herded the hostages into a single location. Classic stronghold play," Rexa whispered, her thermal vision picking up heat signatures through the walls. "They're waiting for us." Commander Thrace's voice crackled through their comms. "Blue team, sweep left. Red team, you're with me down the central corridor. Russo, try not to get vaporized in the first 30 seconds. "No promises," Jake muttered. They moved in silence, weapons raised. The outpost's emergency lighting cast everything in sickly yellow. Jake's hand rested on his plasma rifle, but his other hand, almost unconsciously, touched the handle of his katana. The Krellian raiders hit them at the junction of two corridors. Energy fire erupted from three directions simultaneously. Purple plasma bolts screamed through the air, superheating the oxygen as they passed. The team scattered, returning fire. Two raiders went down immediately, their shields overwhelmed by concentrated bursts. Then Jake saw it. A Krellian raider, easily 7 feet of armored muscle, swinging a plasma rifle directly at him. The alien's finger squeezed the trigger. Time seemed to slow as the bolt of superheated energy lanced toward Jake's center mass at the speed of light. Jake's hand blurred to his back. The katana sang as it left its sheath. And then, in a motion that would haunt physicists for the next century, Jake Russo swung his sword through the path of a plasma beam. The blade connected. The plasma bolt deflected. It ricocheted off the folded steel like a tennis ball off a racket, changing trajectory by 90 degrees and punching through two raiders who'd been using a doorway for cover. They dropped, smoking holes in their armor. The firefight stopped. Not tactically, not strategically. It just stopped, because every sentient being in that corridor had witnessed something that violated everything they understood about reality. Vorn's translator actually glitched. That's not. The energy coefficient. Thermal dissipation alone should have. Rex's mouth hung open, her third eyelid blinking rapidly. That's not how light works. That's not how any of this works. The Krellian raider who'd fired the shot stared at his weapon like it had betrayed him. Jake just shrugged, adjusted his grip on the katana, and started walking forward. Still got it. Another raider, either braver or dumber than his friend, opened fire. Jake's blade moved in a lazy arc, almost casual. The plasma bolt pinged off the steel and took out a ceiling panel. Sparks rained down. "Stop shooting at him, you idiots!" One of the raiders screamed in panicked Krellian. "He's deflecting them! He's deflecting light with metal!" Another shrieked. Jake kept walking. A third shot came. He batted it aside like swatting a fly. The bolt careened into a wall console, which exploded in a shower of components. A fourth shot. Fifth. Sixth. Each one redirected with increasingly bored precision. "Is anyone else seeing this?" Rex's voice had gone up 2 octaves. Vorn's logical Talvarian mind was attempting to process the impossible. Quantum entanglement? Probability field manipulation? Some kind of localized time dilation that allows for predictive, or... Jake interrupted, deflecting another shot without looking. "I'm just that good." He reached the raiders' position. They'd stopped firing, apparently deciding that running was the better part of valor. Jake let them go, turning back to his slack-jawed team. "You coming? Hostages aren't going to rescue themselves." The Krellian communication network lit up like a Christmas tree. Across every frequency, panicked voices overlapped in a cascade of disbelief. "Command, we have a situation. Human target is deflecting energy weapons with a bladed implement." "Repeat that? Did you say deflecting?" "Affirmative. Multiple confirmed hits. 0 penetration. The beam just bounces." "That's impossible. Check your weapon calibrations." "We did. 3 times. He's still doing it." Jake could hear the chatter through his comlink's signal interceptor. He grinned as he advanced down the corridor, his team following at a cautious distance. Vorn had given up trying to provide tactical analysis and had resorted to holding up scanning equipment like a scientist studying a newly discovered species. "The molecular structure of the blade shows no anomalies," Vorn muttered, his translator barely keeping up with his rapid-fire theorizing. "Standard folded steel, carbon content consistent with 21st century Earth metallurgy. No energy shielding, no quantum field generators, no dimensional phasing technology. By every law of physics, thermodynamics, and quantum mechanics, what we just witnessed is completely impossible. And yet," Jake said, rounding another corner, "here we are." 3 more raiders appeared ahead, backing away slowly with their weapons raised but not firing. They'd clearly heard the warnings. "Don't do it, fellas," Jake said conversationally. "Save yourselves the ammunition." One of them, either braver or more skeptical than the others, squeezed off a shot. Jake's katana flashed. The plasma bolt ricocheted, punched through a support beam, and the entire ceiling section groaned ominously. The raiders fled. Rexa slithered up beside him, her scanning equipment chirping rapidly. "Jake, I've been tracking the bolt trajectories. You're not just deflecting them randomly. You're aiming the ricochets. That raider 3 corridors back? You bounced a shot off your sword, through 2 doorways, around a corner, and into his weapon pack." His own gun exploded. Good eye, Jake said. Good eye? Good eye? Rex's scales were rippling with agitation. You're playing billiards with the speed of light. Do you understand how many calculations that requires? The angle of incidence, the reflective coefficient, the beam coherence degradation, I just sort of feel it out, Jake interrupted. Vorn made a sound like a computer crashing. Feel it out. He feels it out. 17,000 years of Talvarian scientific achievement, and this human feels it out. They reached the central laboratory complex. The door had been sealed and reinforced. Jake could hear movement on the other side, multiple hostiles, and somewhere behind them, the terrified breathing of the hostages. Blue team, what's your status? Commander Thrace's voice crackled through the comm. We've reached the central lab, Vorn reported, still staring at Jake like he was a particularly confusing math problem. Also, Russo has apparently broken physics. Thought you should know. Say again? He's deflecting plasma fire with his sword, Commander. Multiple confirmed instances. I have 17 different sensor readings that all confirm the impossible is happening. There was a long pause. Vorn, did you hit your head during the breach? I wish I had, sir. It would make more sense than what I'm actually seeing. The laboratory doors suddenly blasted open from the inside. The Krellian commander, Gorath, filled the doorway like a wall of muscle and armor. He stood nearly 9 feet tall, his exoskeleton augmented with military-grade combat plating. In his 4 massive hands, he held what could only be described as a gun that had angry rage issues. The Devastator Mk5I, capable of outputting enough focused energy to vaporize a light transport vehicle. I don't know what tricks you're playing, human. Gorath's voice rumbled through his helmet's external speakers. But no one deflects a Devastator blast. The energy output alone will melt whatever toy you're holding before your brain can even process the light. Jake looked at the massive weapon, then at his katana, then back at Gorath. You know, everyone keeps telling me what I can't do. It's starting to hurt my feelings. Then let me end your suffering. Gorath's weapon began to charge, the characteristic whine building to a crescendo. Energy crackled along the barrel. The air temperature in the corridor spiked 15 degrees. Warning indicators flashed across every team member's HUD. Rexa grabbed Jake's arm. Jake, even you can't. Probably not, Jake agreed cheerfully. The Devastator fired. The beam was 3 feet wide, a column of pure annihilation that turned the air itself into plasma. It screamed down the corridor with enough force to punch through a starship hull. Jake's sword moved. The impossible happened again, but bigger. The Devastator's beam hit the katana's edge at a precise 45-degree angle. The massive energy bolt deflected upward, carved through the ceiling, bounced off a support beam, ricocheted off a wall panel, changed direction again off a broken door frame, and proceeded to carom around the laboratory like the universe's deadliest game of pinball. Gorath's own troops scattered, screaming. The beam took out a weapons rack, bounced again, destroyed a computer terminal, another ricochet. 2 raiders dove for cover too late and their shields overloaded instantly. The beam bounced a 7th time off a piece of damaged equipment and slammed directly into Gorath's Devastator, which promptly exploded in his hands. The Krellian commander stood there, smoking gauntlets raised, staring at the melted remains of his weapon. Around him, his entire raider crew was either unconscious, stunned, or seriously reconsidering their career choices. Jake lowered his katana and rolled his shoulders. Anybody else want to test it? 12 Krellian weapons clattered to the floor simultaneously. That's what I thought. Jake sheathed his sword with a satisfying click and walked past the stunned Gorath into the laboratory. Hostages in here? Great. Everyone stay calm. We're with the coalition. Let's get you folks home. Behind him, Vorn was making sounds that suggested his logical brain had finally given up entirely. Rexa just kept repeating. 7 bounces. 7. That's not even possible with a supercomputer. Gorath slowly raised his hands in surrender, his voice barely a whisper. What are you? Jake glanced back over his shoulder. Just a guy who believes in bringing the right tool for the job. Gorath's surrender should have been the end of it. In any rational universe, when the commander drops his weapon and raises his hands, the fight is over. But Jake had learned a long time ago that the universe had a peculiar sense of humor, especially where he was concerned. The Krellian commander stood there, his massive frame trembling slightly. Not from fear, Jake realized, but from something worse. Confusion. Existential crisis. The kind of mental breakdown that happens when everything you thought you knew about reality decides to take a vacation. You. Gorath's voice modulated through several octaves as his translator struggled to convey the appropriate level of bewilderment. You deflected a Devastator blast. A full-power Devastator blast, with a piece of sharpened metal. Technically, it's folded steel. Jake corrected. There's a difference. There shouldn't be ANY difference when faced with a weapon that outputs 4.7 gigajoules of focused plasma energy. Gorath's voice cracked. The thermal radiation alone should have vaporized you and everything within a 6-meter radius. Vorn, who had managed to reboot his cognitive functions, chimed in helpfully. He's absolutely correct, Russo. I've run the calculations 14 times. You should be a small pile of carbon molecules. Thanks for that, Vorn. Really helpful. The hostages were huddled in the corner of the laboratory. 12 scientists who looked like they'd been having a very bad day that had somehow gotten even weirder. A human woman in a lab coat stood up shakily, adjusting her glasses. Did he just reflect a plasma weapon with a sword? She asked no one in particular. Repeatedly, Rexa confirmed, her scanner still chirping away. I've recorded the entire engagement. Nobody's going to believe this without video evidence. Hell, I don't believe it with video evidence. Jake moved toward the hostages, his posture relaxed, non-threatening. Everyone okay? Anyone hurt? The scientists shook their heads mutely, still processing what they'd witnessed. Good. We're going to get you out of here. Just stay close. And the emergency lighting suddenly shifted from yellow to crimson. A new alarm klaxon blared, this one deeper and more urgent. Commander Thrace's voice exploded through the comlink. All teams, we have a problem. The raiders planted demolition charges throughout the outpost. Thermal scans show active triggers. They were planning to destroy the entire facility. Gorath's remaining troops suddenly looked even more panicked. One of them, a smaller Krellian with nervous eyes, blurted out, "The charges are on a Deadman switch. They're keyed to Gorath's biosignature. If his heart rate drops below combat levels, the whole station goes up." "You idiots!" Gorath roared at his own team. "That was classified operational security. We're all going to die anyway." The raider shrieked back. Jake sighed. "Of course there are bombs. Why wouldn't there be bombs?" He turned to Gorath. "So let me guess. You stay stressed and aggressive. We all live. You calm down or we kill you. We all become very small pieces scattered across a very large debris field." Gorath's mandibles clicked in what might have been an embarrassed affirmation. "It's standard Krellian raider protocol. Ensures hostage compliance and prevents command elimination." "Fantastic. Just fantastic." Jake looked at Vorn. "How long do we have?" "Based on the energy signatures, maybe 12 minutes before the charges reach critical mass and detonate regardless of the biotrigger." Vorn's multiple hands were flying across his tactical display. "The charges are distributed across 17 different locations throughout the outpost. We'd need to disarm them simultaneously, which requires precision demolition expertise and... Jake interrupted, an idea forming. "We give Gorath something to be really, really stressed about." Everyone turned to look at him. "Russo, what are you planning?" Rex's voice carried equal parts curiosity and dread. Jake walked back to Gorath, who instinctively stepped back despite being nearly twice Jake's size. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay very, very scared. Because I'm going to give you a demonstration." "A demonstration of what?" "Of why bringing a sword to a laser fight was always the right call." Jake unsheathed his katana again. The blade caught the emergency lighting, casting red reflections across the walls. He reached down to his belt and pulled out a small signal flare, the kind used for emergency evacuation marking. "Vorn, I need you to map the exact locations of all 17 charges." "Already done, but I don't see how. Feed the coordinates to everyone's HUD." "Rexa, I need you to mark each charge location with targeting lasers from your scanner." "Jake, those are survey lasers, not weapons. They're about as powerful as a flashlight." "Perfect. Do it." Rexa exchanged glances with Vorn, then shrugged and activated her scanner's targeting matrix. 17 thin red laser beams lanced out from her equipment, bouncing through doorways and corridors, each one terminating at a bomb location. The beams were barely visible, more like suggestions of light than actual illumination. Jake popped the signal flare and tossed it into the air. As it arced upward, already burning bright white, he moved. The katana became a blur. Jake's first strike hit the flare at an angle, sending a spray of burning phosphorus fragments in 17 different directions. Each fragment was moving at terminal velocity, enhanced by the force of his strike. But that was just the setup. His second strike came so fast it seemed to overlap with the first. The katana's edge caught one of Rex's targeting lasers, and somehow, impossibly, reflected it. The laser bounced, hit another fragment of burning phosphorus, which redirected it again. Jake moved through a pattern that looked like choreography, his blade intercepting and redirecting laser beams, phosphorus fragments, and even stray photons from the emergency lighting. The laboratory became a three-dimensional diagram of impossible geometry, light bent at angles that would make a physicist weep. The burning fragments traced paths that defied ballistic trajectories, and Jake stood in the center of it all, his katana moving in patterns that seemed to conduct the chaos like a symphony. "He's creating a cascade effect," Vorn whispered, his sensors struggling to track everything happening. "Each deflection is precisely calculated to trigger the next. He's using the flare fragments as markers, the laser beams as guides, and his sword as the director of the entire sequence." 11 minutes and 30 seconds after the alarm started, 17 pieces of burning phosphorus arrived at 17 different bomb locations simultaneously. The charges, designed to respond to conventional disarming techniques, had no protocols for being hit by pinpoint strikes of burning metal traveling at precisely calculated angles. Their trigger mechanisms overloaded and shut down in sequence, one after another, like dominoes falling. The alarm stopped. The emergency lighting shifted back to yellow. Commander Thrace's voice came through the comlink, stunned. "All charges neutralized." "How did you—" Jake sheathed his katana and turned to Gorath, who had watched the entire display with an expression of pure, undiluted terror. The Krellian commander's heart rate, according to Vorn's bioscanner, had spiked to levels typically associated with near-death experiences. "Still think I brought the wrong weapon?" Jake asked mildly. Gorath sank to his knees, his massive frame shaking. "I surrender. Completely. Totally. My entire crew surrenders. We'll confess to everything. We'll testify against our suppliers. We'll name every contact we have. Just, please, don't do that again." The other raiders were nodding frantically, several of them already accessing their data storage to prepare their confessions. Jake looked at the hostages, who were staring at him with expressions that ranged from awe to the kind of fear usually reserved for natural disasters. "Everyone ready to go home?" They nodded silently. "Great." Jake keyed his comlink. "Commander Thrace, hostages are secure, raiders have surrendered, and the demolition charges are neutralized. We're ready for extraction." There was a long pause. "Russo, I'm going to need a very detailed report about what just happened." "Sure thing, Commander. It'll be a short report, though." "Why's that?" "Because I have no idea how I did any of that." Station Helix 7 had seen its share of returning heroes. Decorated officers, victorious squadrons, mercs who'd pulled off impossible extractions. But nothing in the station's 50-year history prepared it for the reception Captain Jake Russo received when his team docked 3 hours later. The landing bay was packed. Word had spread faster than light speed, which was ironic considering the whole situation involved deflecting things that traveled at light speed. Engineers, xenobiologists, quantum physicists, military analysts, and at least 40 different species of curious onlookers had gathered to witness the man who'd apparently decided that the laws of physics were more like the suggestions of physics. Jake stepped off the transport ramp and immediately wanted to step back on. "Captain Russo!" A Valorian scientist practically teleported in front of him, her tentacles waving frantically. "I represent the Galactic Institute of Applied Sciences. We need to study your sword immediately. The quantum implications alone could revolutionize our understanding of matter-energy interactions." "The sword is clearly secondary," argued a crystalline being whose name was unpronounceable. "It's obviously a human genetic mutation. Some form of localized probability manipulation or psionic deflection field." "You're both wrong," insisted a third voice, this one belonging to a floating brain in a containment jar. "Literally. It's the technique, the specific angles, the timing. I need detailed motion captures of every muscle movement." Jake tried to push through the crowd. "Guys, I really just want to get some food and maybe sleep for like 16 hours. We're prepared to offer you 15 million credits for exclusive research rights." The Valorian continued, blocking his path. 20 million, countered the crystalline being. "Gentlemen, please." Commander Thrace descended from an observation platform, his wings buzzing with authority. The crowd reluctantly parted. "Captain Russo needs to debrief before we discuss any scientific inquiries." "Thank you," Jake muttered. Thrace leaned in closer, his compound eyes reflecting Jake's exhausted face 100 times over. "That said, I also need to know what the hell happened out there. My official report currently reads like science fiction. Commander, it was science fiction. I was there and I don't believe it." They made their way to the debriefing room, though "made their way" was generous. It was more like running a gauntlet of increasingly bizarre questions shouted by increasingly desperate scientists. By the time they reached the relative safety of the military wing, Jake had been offered research contracts, book deals, a reality show, and one particularly bold marriage proposal from a species he couldn't even identify. The debriefing room was blessedly quiet. Vorn and Rexa were already there, along with 3 military analysts and a very serious-looking intelligence officer named Commander Pell. Captain Russo. Pell's voice was flat, professional. I've reviewed the sensor data from your team, all 17 recordings. I've also reviewed the recordings from the Krellian Raiders' equipment, which we confiscated, and the outpost's security footage, and satellite telemetry from 3 different observation platforms, and I still don't believe what I'm seeing. Pell brought up a holographic replay. There was Jake, deflecting plasma fire like he was conducting an orchestra. This violates everything we know about energy physics, material science, and basic thermodynamics. Vorn raised one of his 4 hands. I've prepared a preliminary analysis. 17 different theoretical frameworks, each attempting to explain the phenomenon. He projected his own hologram, filled with equations that looked like they'd been written by a mathematician having a fever dream. Theory 1 suggests quantum entanglement between the sword and the plasma bolts. Theory 2 proposes localized timeline manipulation. Theory 3 involves Vorn. Jake interrupted gently. Buddy, I appreciate the effort, but I think you're overthinking this. Overthinking? Vorn's mandibles clicked in agitation. Russo, you deflected coherent light with solid matter. There is no amount of Sabli thinking that qualifies as over in this situation. Rexa slithered forward, her tablet displaying her own analysis. I've been going over the trajectories. Jake, you weren't just deflecting randomly. You were calculating angles of incidence, predicting beam coherence degradation, compensating for atmospheric interference. The processing power required is astronomical. Some of those ricochets went through 7 different reflections. 7. I told you, I just sort of feel it out. You can't feel out quantum mechanics. Rex's voice had gone up 3 octaves. Commander Pell held up a hand for silence. Captain Russo, I need you to understand something. As of 2 hours ago, 17 different galactic governments have filed formal requests for information about your capabilities. The Krellian Raiders are claiming in their confessions that you're some kind of human super soldier. The scientific community is having a collective meltdown. And I have 3 different intelligence agencies asking if you're using technology we haven't disclosed. Jake leaned back in his chair. What do you want me to tell you, Commander? That I've got some secret quantum sword blessed by ancient Earth monks? That I underwent genetic modifications? That I made a deal with a cosmic entity? He shrugged. I'm just a guy who practiced a lot. Practiced, Pell repeated flatly. Practiced. You practiced deflecting energy weapons with a medieval sword. Well, no, that part was new. Usually I just practice the sword forms. You know, katas, cutting exercises, the basic stuff. Been doing it since I was 12. Guess muscle memory kicked in when that first raider shot at me. Jake grinned. I was as surprised as everyone else when it worked. The room fell silent. Vorn's translator actually rebooted. Rex's mouth hung open so wide a small bird could have nested in it. You're telling me, Commander Pell said very slowly, that the single most significant military development in galactic history, the ability to deflect energy weapons with a melee weapon, happened because you got lucky? I mean, luck is just preparation meeting opportunity, right? That's not how science works. Worked pretty well today, though. Commander Thrace, who'd been observing silently, finally spoke. Captain Russo, regardless of the mechanism, you've become a strategic asset. We need to understand your capabilities. We need to know if this can be replicated, taught, weaponized. Commander, with all due respect, I have no idea if I can even do it again. Jake stood up, his katana still strapped to his back. Maybe it was a fluke. Maybe it was quantum probability having a weird day. Maybe the universe just wanted to see if it could break its own rules for kicks. I don't know. Then we need to test. No. Jake's voice was firm but not aggressive. I'm not a lab experiment. I'm a merc who did his job and saved some hostages. The raiders are in custody, the scientists are safe, and I completed my contract. That's all that matters. Pell and Thrace exchanged glances. Years of military hierarchy and protocol were clearly warring with the reality that they couldn't actually force Jake to do anything. He wasn't regular military, he was a contractor, and his contract was fulfilled. Fine, Pell finally conceded, but this isn't over. The galactic community won't just let this go. They'll have to. Jake moved toward the door. Now, if you'll excuse me, I really do need that food and sleep. He made it 3 steps before Vorn called out. Russo, wait. Just one question. Just one. For my own sanity. Jake paused. Shoot. How? How is it even remotely possible? Give me something. Anything. A theory? A guess? A philosophy? Something my brain can hold on to so I don't spend the rest of my life questioning everything I thought I knew about reality. Jake considered for a moment, his hand resting on the door panel. Then he turned back, and for the first time since the entire incident began, his expression was completely serious. You want to know the secret, Vorn? The real reason it worked? Please. Humans have this old saying, fake it till you make it. We call it confidence, but really, it's just stubbornness dressed up in fancy clothes. Everyone told me bringing a sword to a laser fight was stupid. Every tactical manual, every combat instructor, every piece of conventional wisdom said energy weapons made melee combat obsolete. Jake smiled. But here's the thing about humans. We're really bad at accepting the word impossible. We hear you can't do that, and our brains immediately translate it to, hold my beer and watch this. That's not a scientific explanation, Vorn protested. No, it's not. But maybe science isn't the point. Maybe the point is that everyone was so convinced it couldn't work that nobody ever actually tried. You ever think about that? How many impossible things are just things nobody's been stubborn enough to attempt? Rex's scales rippled. So, you're saying you deflected plasma weapons with a sword because you were too stubborn to admit it was impossible? I'm saying I deflected plasma weapons with a sword because I never thought it was impossible in the first place. Big difference. Commander Pell made a sound like air escaping from a pressurized container. That's the most unscientific, illogical, and completely human explanation I've ever heard. Yeah, Jake agreed cheerfully. We're good at those. He opened the door, but paused one more time. Oh, and Vorn? Stop trying to explain it with equations. Sometimes the universe doesn't run on math. Sometimes it runs on audacity. The door slid shut behind him, leaving the room in stunned silence. Commander Thrace was the first to speak. Did he just suggest that the fundamental laws of physics can be overridden by human stubbornness? I think he did, Pell confirmed. Vorn's 4 hands were trembling slightly. My entire worldview, everything I studied, 17,000 years of Talvarian scientific achievement. And it can be trumped by a human just being too dumb to know something is impossible. Not dumb, Rexa corrected quietly, staring at the closed door. Too confident. There's a difference. Is there, though? Vorn asked the universe at large. The universe, as usual, declined to comment. 3 weeks later, the story had spread to every corner of civilized space. The Galaxy News Network ran it as their lead story for 5 consecutive days. Human deflects energy weapons with ancient sword became the most watched headline in GNN history. Scientists formed committees to study the phenomenon. Military strategists scrambled to update their tactical doctrines. Weapons manufacturers started getting inquiries about plasma-resistant swords, which was a sentence nobody had ever expected to write. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, Jake Russo sat in the Station Helix 7 cantina, drinking his overpriced Earth coffee, his katana resting against the table beside him. A young human recruit, fresh from Earth and clearly starstruck, approached nervously. Captain Russo? Sir, I just wanted to say, that thing you did was amazing. I've been studying martial arts my whole life, and seeing you prove that traditional weapons still have a place in modern combat, it's inspiring. Jake looked up, studied the kid's earnest face, and smiled. Thanks. Word of advice, though? Anything, sir. Don't try to recreate what I did, seriously. I'm still not entirely sure I didn't just get cosmically lucky. You try deflecting a plasma bolt and you'll probably just get a very expensive funeral. The recruit's face fell slightly. Oh, so it was just luck? Maybe. Or maybe it was years of practice meeting one very weird moment. Or maybe it was the universe having a laugh. Point is, don't base your combat strategy on what might have been a fluke. But if it wasn't a fluke? If it was real? Jake took a sip of his coffee, considering. Then I guess the lesson is this. Everyone's going to tell you what's impossible. And most of the time, they're right. Energy weapons should beat swords. That's just basic science. But every once in a while, when you're really lucky, or really skilled, or the universe is feeling generous, impossible just means nobody's done it yet. The recruit grinned. So fake it till you make it? Something like that. Now go practice with actual weapons that make sense. Plasma rifles. Kinetic accelerators. You know, things that don't require divine intervention to work. As the recruit walked away, Rexa slithered up to Jake's table. You're becoming a legend, you know. I've heard at least 30 different versions of the story. In some of them, you deflected 100 shots. In others, you were fighting barehanded. One version claims you parried a shot with your teeth. My teeth, really? Human myth-making is fascinating. You people turn everything into tall tales. Jake shrugged. Better than being forgotten. Vorn joined them, his multiple arms carrying what looked like his 37th analytical report. I've given up, he announced, setting the tablet down. After 3 weeks of analysis, consultation with the finest scientific minds in 7 galaxies, and more simulations than I care to count, I have concluded that what you did is absolutely, definitively impossible. And yet I did it. And yet you did it. Vorn's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or despair. My new working theory is that humans exist in a state of quantum superposition, where the impossible and the possible occupy the same space, until you actually attempt something, at which point reality just picks whichever outcome would be more dramatic. That sounds very scientific. It's not. It's gibberish. But it's the only explanation that fits the data. Rexa ordered a drink from a passing server bot. So what now, Jake? You've got offers from every major data. Military in the galaxy. Research institutions want to study you. Someone even offered you a position as a combat instructor at the Galactic Academy. I know. I've been ignoring them all. Why? Jake looked at his katana, the simple weapon that had somehow broken the galaxy's understanding of physics. Because the moment I try to turn this into a system, a technique, a teachable skill, it stops being what it was. It was never about the sword. It was about the moment. The absolute, stubborn refusal to accept that I was about to die. That's very philosophical, Vorn observed. Yeah, well, breaking reality gives you time to think. Jake finished his coffee and stood, strapping the katana back across his shoulders. Besides, I've got another contract starting next week. Standard escort mission. Probably won't involve any impossible physics. Probably? Rexa echoed. With my luck? Who knows? Maybe I'll punch a black hole or headbutt a supernova. Vorn's translator made a strangled sound. Please don't joke about that. After what I've witnessed, I'm not entirely certain you couldn't do it. Jake laughed and headed for the cantina exit. Behind him, his friends watched him go, this impossible human who'd accidentally revolutionized warfare by being too stubborn to die. Think he'll do it again? Rexa asked quietly. Do what? Deflect energy weapons? No. Something impossible. Vorn considered this, his analytical mind wrestling with probability matrices and quantum uncertainties, and the uniquely human variable that had broken all his calculations. Yes, he finally said, I think he will. Because apparently, humans don't need permission from the universe to do impossible things. They just do them and apologize to physics later. That's terrifying. Yes. Yes, it is. Across the station, Jake Russo walked through the corridors, his ancient sword resting comfortably against his back, completely unaware that he'd become the galaxy's favorite argument against determinism, probability theory, and the concept of impossibility itself. Behind him, 17 different civilizations were redesigning their combat doctrines. Ahead of him, another impossible situation was probably waiting, and somewhere in between, the universe was taking notes. Because if there was one thing Captain Jake Russo had proven beyond any shadow of scientific doubt, it was this. Humanity didn't just reach for the stars. They brought swords to laser fights and somehow made it work. And really, what could be more human than that?